Okay, welcome to class tonight. I hope you missed having class last week. Believe me, I would have much rather been in class than where I was doing what I was doing. But we're here together tonight in a brand new year, 2023. Now tonight we're going to start Romans 36 notes, and if you're watching from online, you can look down there and it should be up. If not, it'll be up in a few days. You'll see the Romans number 36 notes, and you can copy them down. If you have no way of getting the notes, downloading the notes, feel free to call 330-453-2519. Give us your name and address, and we'll be happy to mail those notes out to you. But we want you to have the notes. Now we're going to look at the tribes of Israel in a little synopsis of where they have been, where are they now, and what awaits them in the future. So, in note 1, the exiled Israelites became, and now we've looked at this, but now I'm kind of trying to tie all this together. They became Sumerians. That's not Sumerians, that's Sumerians. And Scythians and Goths, Goths. Now that's not the Goths you see running around wearing all the dark clothes and the dark fingernails. No. They were a people. And at least part of these three groups, notice what I said, part of these three groups, not all the Sumerians, not all the Scythians, not all the Goths were Hebrew, but at least part of these three groups were of Hebrew origin. And they invaded Western Europe. So they came in, invaded Western Europe, where they were called barbarians. They were called barbarians. Now, that's not what we tend to think of a barbarian. Maybe you watched at some point Conan the Barbarian. Okay. And the origin of the name barbarian is very uncertain. We don't know why at that point in history they were called barbarians, but they were called barbarians. It may be related to the Semitic Babaru, which in ancient times was interchangeable with Haburu, which sounds a whole lot like what? Hebrew. Meaning Hebrew? Yeah, Hebrew. So in other words, they were not being called barbarians because, they were just going around grunting and acting very, mean, aggressive. No, they were called barbarians because it was kind of a way of saying Hebrew in that language. So tonight we're going to look at Reuben, and I'm going to give you some information before we look at our notes. We know that Reuben was the firstborn son of Jacob, Israel. The reason why I'm saying Jacob, Israel is because Jacob, remember, God changed his name to Israel. And Leah. And you can read about that in Genesis 29, 32. And you'll also read about it in Genesis 46:8. The name Reuben comes from the Hebrew ra'ah, to see, and ben, meaning son. And I'm just going to throw out a sidebar because we're going to get to it as we go down through our recap of Reuben. And that is, there are two acceptable words in Hebrew for son. One of them, of course, is ben. The other is the Hebrew word for son, that is more popular in Aramaic, which is bar. Now, that's going to be really interesting when we start to trace Reuben, where they went, where they ended up. So, Reuben was the firstborn. Now, when Jacob, Israel, was blessing his sons before his death, we know that something that Reuben had thought was hidden for a long time was finally revealed. And Jacob, in Genesis 49, 3 and 4, Jacob rebukes Reuben. And in the Hebrew it reads like this, mounting his couch. But we know that he basically slept with Bilhah, who was Jacob's concubine. And he curses him with these words in Hebrew. Pahas kamayim al totar. Basically, if you are going to translate that directly from Hebrew to English, this is how it comes out. Unstable as water, may you not be preeminent. It's a little bit different when you read the English translation in your Bible. In fact, let me just look. I know it's not, but this is the literal translation from the Hebrew. So, in Genesis 49, let's see how it reads, the English Bible. Unstable as water, you shall not excel. Roughly the same thing, but here, when you translate it directly from the Hebrew, I think it's a little clear. You're going to lose your position as the firstborn. You will not be preeminent, and probably that is a better translation there, preeminent. So Reuben lost his firstborn status, and so during really the period of conquest and occupation, the tribe of Reuben begins to lose preeminence to the tribe of Joseph, which grew to a point and was so large, actually split. And you know that was because when Jacob laid his hands on the two sons of Joseph, he said, "These are mine." And he adopted them. They were no longer grandsons, but he adopted them as his own sons. And to them were given the material blessings of the firstborn. But he reserved the right to rule and lawgiver to the tribe of Judah. And that becomes important, even in some things I shared before we went live tonight, regarding the fact that Judah, descendants of Judah, through David, are ruling many places in the world today. So, at one time, the tribe of Reuben evidently was in danger of extinction. So if you will turn with me to Deuteronomy 33, you will see that Moses only mentions one line about Reuben. This is Moses' final blessing to the children of Israel. He said, "Let Reuben live and not die." So evidently the tribe was facing extinction, nor let his men be few. As you look in the book of Judges, you will see that no judges came from the tribe of Reuben. Again, going back to what Jacob, Israel said from Reuben, he said, "Unstable as water." Is there anyone who would want to go before a judge that was unstable? I don't think so. And so I don't think it's an accident that no judges come from the tribe of Reuben. This tribe, the tribe of Reuben, remained semi-nomadic. They subsisted principally from sheep raising and cattle raising. Deborah, in Judges chapter 5, reprimands Reuben for not taking part in the war against Jabin and Sisera. And she said he'd rather tarry in his sheepfolds and to hear the piping of the flocks. In other words, playing with the sheep, piping and playing music with the sheep. So, in the early period of the monarchy, when you had kings of Israel, which would have obviously been Saul and then David and Solomon, the Reubenites still ranged far and wide. They just were nomadic with their sheep and their cattle. They would fight desert tribes as they wandered through the borders and regions of Jordan. And this is one point I am going to just throw out to you. Reuben's, if you look at Reuben's genealogies, if you want to take this down, you'll see Reuben's genealogies in Genesis 46:9, Genesis 46:9, Numbers 26, 5 through 9, Numbers 26, 5 through 9, and 1 Chronicles 5, verses 1 through 8. So if you want to look at the genealogies of Reuben, that's where you're going to find them. And they indicate that the tribe had family ties with other Israelite tribes. Now, what do I mean by family ties? Well, they would intermarry with members of other tribes. And that will become very important. So if we will look at your notes, Reuben, note 2, Reuben was Jacob Israel's firstborn son. Now, if you're going to trace the tribe of Reuben, then you're going to have to know who his sons were. Right? So Reuben had 4 sons. He had Hanoch, Hanoch, Hanoch. Phalu, Phalu, Phalu.
Oh, that's an H.
Phalu, yeah. You remember Pethe? Transliterating the names from the Hebrew. Hezron, or sometimes you will see it Hetzron, but it's Hezron is an acceptable transliteration. Hezron. And Carmi, Carmi. Now these 4 sons become distinct, and there should be a blank after that, after distinct clans. 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 So they become distinct clans under the tribe of Reuben. So you have Reuben as a tribe, and then underneath Reuben, you're going to have the clans of Reuben, and then they're going to have what? They're going to have families under them and families under them. Now, as they branch out, because how many know nobody stays in the same place? It used to, even here in America, we understand sometimes for example, my mother's siblings all stayed in Guernsey County. I knew my aunts and my uncles. In fact, Actually, we kind of lived down the road from each other, and we grew up as one great big group of siblings. But guess what? We live in many different places. We don't live in the same place. So understand, as these clans branched out, these names are going to appear in strange places because they're traveling. How many of it, I'm not going to pry, but how many have done your DNA with a DNA place? How many know you get hits sometimes on this is a relative and you're thinking, who in the world is this person? And I have gotten them. And of course, I have relatives, DNA relatives in Israel. I have DNA relatives in Egypt, and Eastern Europe, United Kingdom. Okay, why? Well, because you don't know, but as the families branch out, guess what? They take their DNA with them. And so you're going to see them sometimes in strange places. Now, at the time of the Exodus from Egypt, the tribe of Reuben, because they did a census when they left Egypt, and so the tribe of Reuben numbered 46,500 males. They only counted the males. And those are the males above 21 years old. Why would it be males above 21? Fighting men. Then a plague hit the camp. They leave Egypt. Remember, there were some plagues that hit the children of Israel, some of them for disobedience. Then a plague hit the camp, and Reuben's number was reduced to 43,730. They lost some people. Now, in the 40-year wandering in the desert, Reuben's position was on the south side of the tabernacle, and he was flanked by the tribes of Simeon and Gad. And I forgot to bring the chart. I'll try to remember to just bring it in next Wednesday so you can see this. Now this is what's going to be important. I'm just going to kind of give you a little tease on this one. When you begin to see the tribes migrate, let's say you look at a map, particularly of Europe, you're going to see something. You're going to see in their migrations, many of these tribes end up living in proximity with the same tribes they were with all the way back in the wilderness wanderings. It's very interesting. Now, in 1 Chronicles chapter 5, and I want us to go to 1 Chronicles chapter 5. Whoops. Okay, let's go to 1 Chronicles chapter 5. If you wonder what's going on, why it kind of looks strange, I have many notes in my Bible, and they just now went all over the floor. If you're at home, you didn't see that. Okay, and if you have a Bible like mine, at the top of 1 Chronicles 5:1, I have a heading that says, the family of Reuben. So, verse 3 says, the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, were Hanoch. Now this one comes and says, my Bible translates it Phalu. How many know that is the same Hebrew letter? Pei and Phei are the same Hebrew letter. Hezron and Carmi. Okay, so you know that. Now jump down to verse 6. And Bera his son, whom Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, carried into captivity. He was leader of the Reubenites. So we know that what? The leader of the Reubenites was carried off into captivity by the king of Assyria. And then look at verse 9. This is going to tell you where the tribe, when they went into captivity, were exiled. Eastward they settled as far as the entrance of the wilderness, this side of the river Euphrates. Okay. Because, and this is why, because their cattle had multiplied in the land of Gilead. Okay, so stretched out there. So the tribe of Reuben was known for their great possessions. They were wealthy. A descendant of Reuben, Bera, a leader of the Reubenites, was carried away captive by Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. And the Bible tells us what? They were rich in cattle. They're rich. So we know that at the time of the Assyrian captivity, we know where they went. And we know why they were resettled in that area, because it was good for cattle, and they were rich in cattle. They had many, many heads of cattle. Any questions about the captivity? Okay, now I want us to look at Reuben in the Middle East before the exile and in Scythia after it. Before the exile by Assyria. Before the exile by Assyria, the tribes of Reuben, Gad, G-A-D, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, M-A-N-A-S-S-E-H. So remember, they could have had land allotments west of the Jordan River. Remember, they went to Moses and they said, we want to settle over there. Why? Because if you've ever visited that area, and some of you have been with me when we've gone into Jordan, it's very fertile. And so because they wanted to raise cattle and it was a wonderful pasture land in that area, they said, we want to go there. And Moses gave them permission if they would stay on the western side of the Jordan until their enemies were subdued and the other tribes had settled in their land allotments west of the Jordan. And then when they did that, then they were allowed to settle then on the east side of the Jordan River. And they settled together in Gilead, G-I-L-E-A-D. These, I want you, if you can just kind of do mental post-it notes. I want you kind of to mental post-it note the sons of Reuben. And then I want you to remember this, Gilead, because that's where they settled. Because you're gonna see this pop up as we trace where Reuben went. And so they were settled together in Gilead and Bashan on the eastern banks of the Jordan River, as well as in the land of Israel. Now, according to 1 Chronicles 4:42, it says, now some of them, 500 men of the sons of Simeon, went to Mount Seir, having as their captain Pelatiah, Neriah, Raphiah, and Uzziel, the sons of Ishi. So, the only thing I want to show you is it's in the Word of God. They settled, so part of the tribe of Simeon, now you have another tribe. Remember what I said? You're going to find that they had intermarried with other tribes. So you have part of the tribe of Simeon also settled there, alongside offshoots from other Israelite tribes. And the reason why this becomes important is because this pattern of settlement would be paralleled later by descendants of these same tribes in Scythia. In other words, what you're going to find as you trace the tribes of Israel, they're not going to be just one tribe and that they just go here and they just take over this area and they just stay right there. No. You're going to begin to see parts of different tribes moving and migrating, sometimes in different times, sometimes through different routes, but they seem to end up in very similar patterns as they even were back in the wilderness and also after they had entered the land and received their land allotment. It's quite interesting. Understand, who was the one who said, I will scatter you among the nations? God did. Now, one must understand that Gilead was a name that was given to a good portion of the land of Israel east of the Jordan River. We would call that land Jordan today. But in that time, it was they just called that whole area Gilead. And that is where the tribe of, and there should be another blank there, Reuben. That is where the tribe, if you just draw a line after of and write Reuben there. That is where the tribe of Reuben settled. They settled in that area, Gilead. Now, Gilead, Gilead, was also the name of a son of Machir, son of Manasseh, Manasseh. And again, I'm going to stop here. Because what happens is the tribes are going to, the tribes are going to have family relations with one another. And as we move along in the migration route, you're going to see some overlapping, and then there gets some confusion because you're going to have a Machir in this tribe, and you're going to have a Machir in that tribe. And they're going to obviously be families, and they're going to have names. And it makes it a little more difficult sometimes to make the distinction. Thus, Gilead was an important, and that's not claim, it's clan. I have no excuse for that other than just poor typing. Clan. So Gilead then became, because what? Gilead was the name of a son of Machir, son of Manasseh. So Gilead was an important clan in the tribe of Manasseh, east and west of the Jordan. So you had half the tribe of Manasseh on the east side of the Jordan River, and you had some on the west side of the Jordan River. And so Gilead's descendants, and remember, Gilead was a son of Machir, who was a son of Manasseh. Those families spread out. Some remained on the east side of the Jordan. Some went to the west side. So you had east and west of the Jordan River. So the name Gilead could also be applied to much of the Israelite area east of the Jordan River, in which were settled, remember, 3 tribes: Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. Now, in their land allotment, as you go east, okay, and if you can refer, remember, you should have land allotment. You should have land allotment maps where you can see this. East of the Jordan River, Manasseh neighbored Reuben. In other words, their land allotment east of the Jordan was right up against Reuben. Now in Scythia, as they begin to migrate, and they will head west. In Scythia, the Samnitai, and you'll get how we come up with Samnitai, that's a clan of Simeon. So you have the Samnitai of Simeon also neighbored the Hugi area. Hugi. Now, I may have ever heard of the Huguenots, French Protestants. Well, they descend from Hugi. So, now, and we know that, well, we're going to get to there, because we're going to know where Reuben settled, primarily where Reuben settled. And it's very interesting that you have Manasseh neighboring Reuben, okay, And then in Scythia, you have Simeon neighboring the Hugi area. And by the way, I'm going to tell you, just a little bit ahead, that's where Reuben's going to end up. So the name Hugi is derived from that of Haggai, son of Gad. But you're going to see there's going to be some intermingling. However, now here's where the monkey wrench gets thrown in. However, most of the Hugi Franks appear. Now hang with me for a minute, because I know this is confusing now, but once we get all of the 12 tribes, then you're going to say, oh, now I get it. You cannot keep them straight. They get together. How many know that? No, I'm not going to. I was going to say something. I'm going to say it anyway, because you all know it anyway. It happens. I remember going. How many remember going to church camp? Anybody remember going to church? Well, I've shared this before. My parents sent me not out of town to camp, not out of state to camp. My parents sent me out of the country to camp. And the first time I went, I was there a day, and I called and I said, I want to come home. And my mother is on the other end of the phone. And my father was at the boys. He was, one of the helpers in the boys' camp. And I said, I want to come home. She said, you can't come home. You're not even in the United States. She said, I can't come and get you. She said, you're just going to have to be happy. Put your hands up. You're just going to have to be happy. Well, by the way, and 2 days later, I was happy. But, the boys were over here, and the girls were over here. And you know what eventually happens? They got together. They get together. Oh, yeah. They get together. See, you're only supposed to get together one time. And that was, they had the midnight hike. That was tradition. By the way, later years it got stopped, by the way. But they had the midnight hike. But I want you to know, I have a picture that proves they get together. Because I had someone take a picture of someone else and someone else, and they got together at the spring. So they're going to get together, and what I want to show you is they're not going to be such distinct tribes with no interaction with the other tribes. There's going to be intermarrying between tribes. So when I say the Hugi Franks, again, Hugi comes from as a clan, and then there's going to become the Franks, who are a part of the tribe of Reuben. And that can kind of, you're going to say, Franks, okay, I know a country. Are we moving there? Yes, we are. We're heading in that direction. So most of the Hugi Franks, now what do I mean? They're the tribe, the clan of Hugi, and then you have the Franks, and guess what? They get together. And they appear to have come from the tribe of Reuben. Now the first son of Reuben was Hanoch. And so there is a Scythian people. Why? Because as they move, again, as they move through certain areas, and so as they move in through Scythia, they're going to have friendships and relationships with the Scythians. And we know that the Scythians, they don't know that. As they're moving through, they don't know that the Scythians are family members, do they? But we know that Scythia come from Isaac, Saka, Scythians, the Saka Scythians, and the Bible tells us something though. Abraham was told by God, by the name Isaac, your descendants will be known. And even as they migrated, even as the northern tribes of Israel migrated after the captivity, you still see some form of the name of Isaac that is used. It's used in different dialects, different languages, and so there are going to be some reversal of letters, but it's the same. So a Scythian people, guess what? The Henioki. The Henioki. Where did the Henioki come from? They came from Hanoch of Reuben. And they had been reported in the Caucasus mountain region. And some of you have ever taken your DNA, and you may get something, it'll come up. Caucasus. To the east of Scythia, in Syrica. Now, here's where we're gonna get a $30 word, but you're gonna see something. And there lived a people called the Rahabani. That, in other words, understand as they're migrating, they're going to be picking up some language from the peoples they go through. And so the peoples are going to look at them and say, what's your name? And they may have said in Hebrew, Reuben. And there's a Rahabani. That's what you are. You're a Rahabani. And by 2 generations down, guess what? The people are calling themselves what? Rahabani. So they were of Reuben, and they lived in a part to east of Scythia. Now, very interesting, in the land of ancient Israel, the tribe of Reuben is called Rabbani. So, what do you see? Well, if the earlier Reuben was migrating after the captivity, they would have called themselves what? Rabbani. And the people that they were moving through would have called them Rahabani. And as they move on, they've picked up the term Rahabani. So that was in the Middle East. Now we're going to look at Reuben in Europe. And I know this is heavy. I'm just trying to show you their names are going to change, but there are going to be some names that are going to pop up and you're going to say, aha, now I can connect the dots. But they didn't stay in the Middle East. They began to migrate, and they're going to migrate into Europe. Now, in West Europe, there's a people called the Franks. The Franks were divided into several groups. Okay, these are the people that lived in an area of the Franks, which is where you get the name of a country eventually. Right. And so they divided into several groups, and guess what? One of which was the Ripuarian Franks. Well, you can kind of see what's happened with the language now. Now it's Ripuarian. And they were so called by the Romans. In other words, the Romans, Rome, they were called this as they were first known to them on the banks of the Rhine River, and in Latin, Ripa means what? Riverbank. These are the riverbank people, Ripuarians. The name is also given as, and here's where you're going to get it, and you're going to see it as we come closer and closer and closer in time. Rubari. So they called him Ripuarian, but the name is also given, and they probably gave themselves Ribari, because this name in Hebrew is another form for Reuben. And you're going to see it in Hebrew. Ribari is another name for Reuben. Now, the ancient Greeks and Romans, as well as the Hebrews, when they came across a foreign name, had a habit of interpreting its meaning according to a similar sounding word in their own language. So if you don't know it, and my name is actually an example of that. Because my name is really, in Hebrew, Sharona. Sharon. And guess what? By the time I was able to know what my name was, because my family had a nickname for me, and they still call me that nickname. And it was only because my great-grandfather couldn't pronounce Sharon or Sharon. And but when I knew what my name was, it became Sharon. But understand, that's the American English translation of the Hebrew Sharon or Sharon. So that's what happened. Okay? Now, we're going to get closer and closer. So, Rabari appears to have been the Franks' own name for themselves. And we know that these are Franks who are what? They are from the tribe of Reuben. And so they call themselves Rabari. But Reuben in Hebrew could also be rendered Rubar. Now you're going to, so Rubari means sons of Reuben. Sons of Reuben, which means what? Descendants of Reuben. So they're keeping, and this is why I'm doing this, not just because it's, I'm throwing all this stuff at you. I want you to see something. They were trying, even though they would later forget who they were, they would forget their faith, they would forget their language, but their identity by name, they were holding on to it in some respect. And so they were saying, by our name, we're sons of Reuben. Now, you get generation out. They may not even know who Reuben is, but they know their name means sons of Reuben. Now, now we're going to get into something else. A shortened form of Reuben is Ruby. There was a friend of my great-grandfather. His name was Reuben, and guess what he was called? Reuben. I heard my mother talk about Reuben. She was looking at a picture with a friend when they were children, and they're looking at this picture and says, and that's Dad, and that's Rube, and she's going on naming all these men. I won't even give the context because I'd be very embarrassed. But it means son. So a shortened form is Ruby. And a people, guess what is going to happen? A people by that name were settled at one stage. Guess where they were settled? On the banks of the Rhine River. And they called themselves Rubies. Now you already know that the Romans called them riverbank people. And then they come along, and guess what? The Ruby people were settled along the Rhine River. And guess what? They just happened to appear to have been Rabari Franks. Franks. F-R-A-N-K-S. Rabari Franks. And again, I'm not expecting you to be able to go home and tell everybody, this is what we studied. No, not at all. But what I want you to be able to see is as these people go, several things. They're going to pick up the names for themselves many times from the people that they're traveling through and migrating through. They're also going to keep some identity somehow. It's going to be a little bit different. They may pick up, because understand as they go along the way, what are they doing? They are having family relationships with different peoples. And they're picking up some of that language. And so that may change, but there are going to be some key elements that you're going to be able to pick up as you. And all this is to prove something. God said to Abraham, I'm going to make your descendants. You're going to have kings come out of you, nations. And your descendants are going to be as the stars in the heavens and the sand of the sea. And I want to show you, when we begin to look across the globe, God fulfilled his promise. So in 276 AD, the Franks, this people called the Franks, were reported as encroaching on the borders of, guess what? Roman Gaul, which is today what? France. And they were pushed back to their bases on the Rhine, which is in the area of what is now what? Germany. So they're pushed back, after which they began a process of peaceful infiltration. And so what they did was said, well, we kind of like Gaul. We like Gaul. We'd like to come to Gaul. So we're not going to try and fight you and overcome you. We'd like to come peacefully. And so what they did was they received lands from the Romans in return for military service. They said, okay, we know you can fight. So if you fight in the Roman military, we'll give you land for your service, and we'll give it to you in Gaul. In the 400s AD, the Franks were sojourning in an area called, guess what? Phalia. Does that ring a bell with anyone? Yeah. Another son of Reuben, Phalu. Again, name changed a little bit. So they've also migrated. And by this time, by the way, by the 400s, you're talking about hundreds of years later, right? So by the way, by the time they come, they don't even know their brethren. They do not know their family. And so the name Phalia is derived from Phalu or Phalui, because now it's been picked up some other letters and different pronunciation. Descendants of the second son of Reuben. And I've given you some references there. And guess what? Now, these people are going to come in and they're called the Phalian Franks, descended from Phalu, or Palu, you're going to see it in different areas, same person. While the Hugo Franks, so there are Franks that are not of the tribe of Reuben. Do you understand what I'm distinguishing? They're Franks. Just like there are, we're all Americans, but some are of Irish descent, some are of Italian descent, some are of Spanish descent. You see what I'm saying? We're all Americans. So they're all Franks because they're in this area, but some are Phalian Franks, some are Rabari Franks, some are Hugi Franks, and they're all, which happen to be from the tribe of Gad, not the tribe of Reuben. So you have Hugo Franks, and here you have a real blend, because the Hugo Franks have now intermarried the Hagi of Gad and the Hanoch of Reuben. Two different tribes have now done what? They've joined and intermarried, and so they make up the Hugo Franks. Okay. All Franks, but from what? Different descendancy. So Hanoch had been in the Scythian area of the Caucasus on the eastern coast of the Black Sea. Now, how many remember when we looked at the beginning of the migration routes where many of them were? In the area of the Black Sea. So, what I wanted to tell you is as they began to migrate, they migrated in different groups over time and not at different times, but they ended up, many of them, in regions close together. Why? It was God's plan. You ever thought that God was moving them where they were to be? Because he said, you are going to be the fullness of the nations. He said, I will scatter you among the nations. And they are called the blessing and fullness of the nations. And remember what he said to Abraham. Now we know that ultimately that spoke, obviously pointed to Christ. But remember he said, your descendants are going to be a blessing. Nations, you will be a blessing to the nations. That's exactly what has happened here. And that's the point I want you to see. It's not the details, it's the big picture that I want you to see, what God was doing. Now the third son of Reuben, I tell you what, I'm going to stop there because I think I have probably overloaded your brains enough. How many feel like, oh my goodness, my head's kind of coming. So I think I'll stop. We'll do the third son. We're going to do Hetzron first. And then you're going to find another people. And these people are not going to be friends. They're going to be some other people. Yep.
Some of them are.
Or some of them are going to be Hessian friends.
There's too many of them. They really got out there.
So let me just end tonight, if you're watching. I want to end tonight with this. God said, I will scatter you among the nations.
Yes.
That's exactly what he did. And I'm going to leave you with another thought. If as you are following the migration route, you understand the same route that was taken when the gospel went around the world.
Wow.
And why is it that certain people groups and people groups within people groups seem to have a more open receptivity to the gospel than others? Have you ever thought about yourself? Why? Why me, Lord? Why did I respond? I know people in my same neighborhood, in my same group, they didn't respond the way I responded to the gospel. Is there something to that? I think there is. I think there is. And so you will see that as they went, and as I will tell you this, and we'll just be looking for it as we move along. There were pockets of people that were scattered. They didn't even know who they were. They didn't know. You know, they lost their language, their faith. They didn't even know who they were. But when the gospel came and was preached to them, they responded. And they became some of the first propagators of the gospel. It's interesting. Because when some of those people have traced not just their DNA, but their haplogroup. Let me give you an example. There was a pastor. All he knew, he was a certain ethnic group. He had been a pastor, visited Israel, visited the Western Wall. And females, that's not done yet, but for males visiting the Western Wall, you can have their DNA done and haplogroup, primarily haplogroup. Okay, as far as he knew, he had been Protestant all of his life, very Protestant. And when they got his haplogroup, they said, your haplogroup has come back, you are in the priestly haplogroup. Well, by the way, you carried your DNA from the time you were born. And your DNA goes back and back and back and back and back. And I would ask you, do you think it just happened? It just happened and he was brought up and he just felt he wanted to be a pastor and share the gospel. I don't believe that. Because God said, this is my plan. This isn't man's plan. This isn't even your enemy's plan. You know, when your enemy came down and took you and put you into exile and you migrated, that wasn't a serious plan. That wasn't Babylon's plan. That was my plan. I will scatter you. And I just leave you with this thought tonight. If God could fulfill that big plan, do you think he can take care of the plan for your life? There's nothing too hard for him. So if you're watching tonight, please let me know you were watching. If you have questions, and you may have questions, I know I kind of threw a lot at you tonight. You may have comments. I would love to hear your comments as we do this study. If you have a prayer request, please let us know. We would love to pray for you. And if you would like to give in response to the teaching that you are receiving, there are many, many different ways to do it. You can send it in. You can, if you're local, you can drop it in at the drop box in the lobby of the church, or you can send it the old-fashioned way in a letter to us. Again, if you need the notes, please just call the church, give us your name and address, and we will get those out in the mail to you as quickly as possible. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and know this, Jesus loves you, and so do we, and we are praying for you, and we will join you again next week to study Where Else Does Reuben Go?